Hey everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Erin Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, Dr. Erin and I are going to do a deep dive into sedentary lifestyles, which is basically characterized by longer periods of inactivity, such as like sitting. And it's just become more and more common in what we see in today's world. And what's happening is that it's starting to raise some concerns due to its potential adverse effects on health. And this is going to be independent of physical activity levels. So the evidence that we're going to go over today, it shows how it can actually be pretty harmful to health. And it will contribute to increased risks of whether that be mortality, cardiovascular disease, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and even some mental health issues. So the goal of this podcast is really going to be going over the culprits of it. So what actually causes you to do it, the health risks associated with it, and then we really want to give you some practical tips on how to avoid this type of lifestyle. So Dr. Erin is going to lead us in this discussion when we talk about mainly the health aspect of it, and I'm going to start leading when we talk about mainly the lifestyle aspect of it. Dr. Erin, what do you got for us? How bad is this type of lifestyle?
So I think this is kind of an interesting topic. I'm guilty of having a somewhat sedentary lifestyle because I work in a clinic and I'm at my desk a lot. So although I get steps in by walking down the hallway to see patients, I really don't spend that much time standing. I spend a lot of time sitting at a desk and notating on patients. So even, um, depending on what your job is, even physicians can be guilty of having sedentary lifestyles if that's all the activity that I did. But I think it's interesting because the risks of having a sedentary lifestyle translate into mortality risk. And there have been several studies on this. One I looked at was looking at African Americans that were over age 65. They followed, it was a prospective cohort that followed about 8,000 people for about 12 years, which is a significant amount of time. Yeah. And basically, they looked at how long these people were sitting versus doing leisure time physical activity. And that was defined as either 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity physical activity. So we're talking about probably just walking in most of these cases. And what they found is that the people that were sitting longer throughout the day had an increased mortality risk. And in fact, when they did follow up in 12 years, about 50% of the people had died because this was an older population, obviously. But that was one of the risk factors was the longer they were sitting, it seemed to translate into all-cause mortality. And it seemed to, in particular, increase the risk of cardiovascular disease as well. The people that actually were moving around and doing some sort of activity had a decreased mortality as compared to somebody who was sitting. And they looked at the time balance index, which basically is a fancy way of measuring how long a person was sitting for throughout the day. I think this is important because I never thought of it in this regard, which is if you are sitting throughout the day, the more times you can get up and like stimulate your heart or do some kind of activity, the better for your health and your metabolism overall. And so I used to think if I work out in the morning and I get my quote unquote steps in, all in the morning, right? I run 5 miles or run 6 miles, whatever it is that I decide to do. That actually is not equivalent as far as risk goes than getting up throughout the day to accomplish those steps. It's better to constantly stimulate your physical activity and your activity levels.
Yeah, no, it was I remember when we did that walking challenge with everybody,
Yeah.
how some people would have like 12,000 steps before like 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then like they would end the day with like maybe 1,400. And it's
Yeah.
like, you did all your activity in the morning. I would have never thought of it like that because I would have thought of it more like calories in, like within 24 hours. If I could get that in during the day, it doesn't matter whether I get it in over the period of the day or just early. So it's a good thing you said that. Taught me something there. But let's go over, I want to take the lead here and kind of go over the culprits that actually lead to this type of lifestyle. And one of the main things is what you just touched on, which is the work environment. Like if you have a desk job, it requires long hours of sitting, right? Which leads to prolonged periods of inactivity. If you have remote work, where you have to, you just kind of get out of bed and you go to your office in your house, or you go to your kitchen table and you do your work from there. There's not a lot of moving around. I would also say within the work environment, there's a work culture where I feel like not many employers will push employees to actually move around because they want them to do as much work as possible. And if they're doing their work at their desk, they're not going to say, yeah, every 15 minutes, go for a 10-minute walk. They're not going to do that because it's going to kind of take away from their bottom line. So work, I think, and the environment there is going to be probably the biggest one. The next one that I see really affecting people, especially nowadays with how much we have available to us, is going to be technology and entertainment. So how long do you sit down and like you're scrolling and you get caught in that rabbit hole and your screen time is going through the roof. You could be taking that screen time, you could actually be walking, sitting down and watching TV. I'm all for family time. And especially if that's at night and you guys are enjoying TV, that's fine, but it shouldn't be like over prolonged periods of time, and it shouldn't be, the only thing you guys do on the weekends. And that goes with video gaming as well. If you see your kids playing a lot of video games, make an effort to get them to go outside, take a break for a little bit.
I think the best thing was Pokemon Go. Because you had to go find stuff
Yeah,
and you had to actually walk. Like people actually got so many steps in.
yeah,
So even if you can gamify it like that, or I know the Wii used to be popular where you used to actually move around your living room or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So there are different ways to incorporate that,
That
but
Wii tennis was fun.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one. Going into the third one would be your home environment. It's not so much like how comfortable your sofas are or your recliners. It's more or less like what do you have in your house that will make people want to just sit down and be there. And a lot of it is like even a nice home entertainment system. Like if you have home theaters or gaming setups, it's going to promote wanting to sit there and be in front of the TV. I'm not saying don't do that, but if you do that, if you do have that, set some limitations, set some restrictions for it. The next would be lifestyle choices. So whether this is your choice to not prioritize getting some regular exercise in, if you choose not to engage in any sport-like activities, if your activities that you want to do are very passive and leisurely, right? Like there's nothing wrong with reading books at all, and I promote that, but don't let that be your only form of activity that you do besides work, right? And then the last one being your age and physical condition, because older individuals have a harder time moving around. So that will restrict them from getting more movement in. And I feel like it's even more important to move around when you are getting older, keep that body in motion. And then some people just have health conditions or physical disabilities where they actually can't move around that often. So it's finding ways to be able to navigate through those different types of situations. But the aging individual, because I believe you're the one who told me this, where hip fractures lead to like the most.
Mortality.
Yeah,
It increases the mortality risk. And really, I've talked about this before, but resistance training becomes important there because rising out of a chair, that's how we measure, um, you know, how much strength you have in your lower body. And that's so important for protecting against falls.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't you go in off of that and kind of go into the five main health risks that are associated with with this type of lifestyle.
So I think these are pretty logical, right? So the first one obviously is going to be your heart, your cardiovascular health. We're talking about physical activity here, even very moderate to not necessarily intense physical activity. So that does protect your heart. If you have a sedentary lifestyle, then you are at a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular mortality. Um, and that risk increases significantly if you are basically sitting for 10 hours a day. And so I don't know that anybody measures, but if you think about it, like a lot of people's desk work are 8 hours a day. So you're already increasing your mortality risk by having a desk job if you don't actually schedule time to get up and move around.
Yeah, it's got to be intentional.
Yeah. And so think about that. I mean, most of us have desk jobs, and I think that that's very significant. And this has been linked to up to a 90% increase in the risk of cardiovascular mortality. So it is significant. The next one that you can think of is an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, which makes sense. If you're not moving around as much, you might gain weight, especially if you have any genetic factors in there that were maybe diabetes runs in your family, you might get type 2 diabetes. Again, sedentary behavior is strongly associated with this. Um, and the next one that you think that's kind of logical is metabolic syndrome. So, um, again, this kind of goes with that obesity picture where you're not moving around as much. And then if you think about the mental aspects of not moving around, not getting out, maybe just being stuck in one position, and we think mental health conditions like depression. Um, so it has been sedentary behavior, it has been linked to an increased risk of depression as well.
Yeah, you even think of like something like cabin fever, where you're
Yeah.
stuck in a cabin. You start to go, that's more or less going crazy because you're just stuck in one area. But that's the first thing I thought about when I
Yeah.
read this was, the risk of depression. Because if you're happy doing what you're doing in terms of like sitting down watching TV, it was hard for me to associate that with being depressed. But it is literally the lack of movement.
Well, and then you got to think which one came first. Maybe the person is depressed and that's why they're not moving around. So I'm not really sure what the relationship is there, but it is associated
Yeah,
with sedentary behavior. Um, One of my favorite ones is the increased risk of low back pain. Um,
favorite.
and I say favorite because I have so many people or patients that come to me with low back pain. And sometimes it's very intense when they present. And the first thing I tell them to do is that the worst thing that they can do is stay in one position for more than 1 hour, which would suggest that they need to move around at least every hour. And the reason is because movement actually helps with low back pain. And if you've ever had low back pain, you know that staying in one position for a prolonged period of time will cause more pain over time, and trying to move out of that becomes even more cumbersome.
Mm.
So you have to keep moving, even though it seems counterintuitive. Obviously, you want to use common sense. You don't want to do any high impact things. But one of the best things you can do for low back pain is just walking. Like if you can get just low intensity movement in, that actually does help resolve these low back pain episodes.
Yeah, I remember at like holidays, my grandfather would get up from the table. He'd be like, "Oh man," I'm like, "Where you going, Grant?" He's like, "Oh, my sciatica's acting up," and he'd have to go walk around a little bit. He would always hold his lower back, but yeah. So those were five, right? Yeah. I would say those are pretty common sense.
Yeah.
in terms of like just thinking about inactivity overall.
I will say that the low back pain, the advice like back in the day, before we did studies looking at low back pain, doctors used to tell patients just to lay in bed. And that was
That's
probably the
worse.
worst
Yeah.
advice that you could give somebody because that made their pain worse.
What about icing or heating?
You can do either, whichever feels better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go into some tips on how to avoid this type of lifestyle. So, what you just basically said, we'll start with that, which is incorporating, regular movement breaks. So whether you
Wait, I
have,
have a question before you start this.
yeah,
On your like client intake, do you ever ask like what their activity level is to calculate their BMR?
well, no, I don't say like, hey, choose an activity level that best,
Okay.
demonstrates what you do. I ask what they do during the day, and then I kind of assess from there.
Okay. I've
Yeah.
had trainers ask like what kind of lifestyle, and
Moderate
I think
and
it is when it
active, very active.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
because
that's using an equation to figure out what your
that's
BMR
what I
should
was just
be.
gonna say
Yeah.
is that most people use like these online calculators to calculate their activity. I will say that that's usually an overestimate. Like your thought process is usually an overestimate of what your activity level is.
Yeah. So even in that course that I was creating, that I well, just kind of spoiler alert there. So, but it's like I'm teaching these people how to figure out their daily, like the person's daily activity. And I literally put in there, like, you don't ever use anything like above X
Yeah.
because people are just overestimating. Like, even me,
Yes.
who's very active, I actually give myself a little bit of a lower number. But those are equations. And remember, our bodies are dynamic, not static. So, that will only give you like a ballpark area where you're supposed to be. Um, but now going back into this, now it's
I
okay.
digress.
Um, Incorporating regular movement breaks. So even if you have like a timer or an app on your phone, something just to get you to stand up. And I like what Dr. Ernst said before, like with the low back pain, like every hour get up, right? And I think that's what you should do. Set it for every hour. Some people say 30 minutes. I think every hour is just fine just to get up and walk around a little bit, walk to the bathroom, walk to a water fountain, get a sip of water, walk back. And to be honest with you, if you tell your employer this, that you need to move around a little bit because you got a little pain or because you just want to get a little bit more activity, they shouldn't say, no, you can't do that. So if you might even start a movement in your workplace where everyone gets up at a certain time, walks for 5 minutes and comes back. One of my favorite things to do is when you're in line, whether that's at the DMV, the bank, the grocery store, when you're in line, start doing some stretches, stretch out your wrists, stretch out your shoulders, touch your toes. Do a little twist to help with your lower back. Those that it's something that's so like overlooked because you're just standing in line and you're not doing anything. So start stretching. It's always good to stretch a little bit. You have any to help include some regular movement breaks?
So there's for me, I keep like these little spin bikes like at the bottom of my desk to use those.
That doesn't work.
It does to get some movement in. But you can also get stand walking
Yeah.
desks, like the treadmill desks, even if it's slow pace, at least you're moving versus sitting. And then also just standing up, just that is movement in itself.
Yeah, you kind of jumped into number three there, but that's
Sorry.
all right. Yeah, but I'm thinking about that little spin bike thing that you have on your desk. If you're sitting down and your feet are on it,
It's not the best angle, but it works.
all
You
right.
can move.
No, I was just saying because usually like pushing your weight would be you like having that activity. You're just kind of moving your feet.
It's more of a calf,
Yeah.
just a calf
Okay.
movement.
I'm trying to picture it in my head right now. It's difficult. Let's go to number two. Number two is the use of technology. So use technology to your advantage. So this is good. I love that Apple Watch has like your step count on it and your heart rate on it. I love using that. I always wear it every day. So if I want to check where I am, I just take a look at that. And you can gamify it. And gamifying things makes everything so much more fun. Just like you said before with the Pokemon Go, or what is it?
Yeah, Pokemon Go. You
Pokemon
didn't
Go.
do that?
No, I didn't do that. I was never in a Pokemon.
I never did it, but I saw people do it.
Yeah.
They looked insane
Yeah.
because everything was
Yeah, until
you couldn't
people
see it,
you
but
run
they
into the
could.
middle of the street and get hit by a car trying to catch, Charizard or whatever it's called. Um, So yeah, so using technology to do this. So just having some, even I bought my father a he lost it, but I bought him it was like a $5 or maybe $6 step counter that he put in his pocket. And it was something so cheap, and but it would count his steps. And was it accurate? Probably not, but it's an inaccurate gauge that he was able to use to say, hey, this is how much I'm getting. I want to pick it up a little bit more. So he would just try to get more numbers. So doing that, I think using technology to our advantage is a big one here. Um, Going into number three, which would be adopting an active work environment, which is what Dr. Aaron said, having something in whether that's a walking desk or a standing desk is really good. I used to have, so here's what I did when I was teaching. I had one of those chairs that have the balls on it. It's a stability ball that would kind of work your core, but I didn't feel anything from that. I thought it was a waste of money. So I went and got this walking treadmill and put it in my, I put it,
I worked with an ER doctor who had one of those and I
yeah.
thought he was nuts. Just
Yeah.
FYI.
I had a walking treadmill. And what's funny is like when I bought it, it was like $100 off of like Facebook.
Marketplace.
Yeah, the Facebook marketplace. And when they brought it over to me, it was so small. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool that like it's a treadmill, but it only went up to 3.5 miles an hour. And I'm like,
That's
what?
perfect for
Well, I know
walking.
it for walking, but
Yeah.
I didn't know it was just a walking treadmill. It was for rehab. So I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So that's what I did. I put it in my classroom,
You want
and
to
my
hear
students would
something?
make fun of me.
You want to hear something funny?
Sure.
I always hated running and I started running in medical school, but I'd never really run on a treadmill ever. And so I'm very uncoordinated. So I think I started at a pace of 2.0, which is a walk. But I thought maybe like when I got up to three, I thought it was running. So yeah, picture that.
I don't know if that's funny or sad. Um, so yeah, so having that stuff, and they even have these like walking mats you could actually put underneath your desk and stand up too, so it's not too bulky. We have something that's pretty cool on our treadmill. I bought like it's like a
Desk.
it's like a tabletop that straps onto the actual treadmill. So it turns into basically a walking desk. So yeah, so that was number three. Number four is making sure that we integrate some physical activity into our daily routine. So every one of my clients has to do a power walk per day. Some people have to do two, but I usually make every single person do a power walk. So they're at least getting one of those in. And then there's obviously step counts that we try to achieve as well. But there's multiple ways of you being able to get in a little bit more movement, like parking in the furthest parking spot away from the grocery store. I know Erin tries to find the closest spot possible and we'll drive around and I'm just like, just park, like we'll walk. But she has to get close. That's a little pet peeve. Taking the stairs instead of the elevator. That's another good one. So I'm pretty sure you all heard like older women would say, yeah, I take the stairs, I don't take the elevator. And they're like bragging about how good of shape they are in. And it's because of that. It's just keep the body in motion. That's what we really want to do here. And then turning chores into like a workout. Now, how do you do that? Or why would you want to do that? Let's say you missed a workout and you really feel like you need to get some activity in, but you really have to clean the house. Put some damn music on, start dancing while you're cleaning. Maybe you time yourself, see how much you can get done in a certain amount of time. So it just pushes you to go a little bit more. It's just getting the heart rate up and moving a little bit more often. Number five is actually getting some regular exercise in. So I mean, Dr. Aaron will definitely attest to this, is that, you want to get some form of resistance training in, just for the benefit of trying to maintain muscle mass as you age. But also, I mean, look, having a strong, healthy body is always a good thing. So trying to get at least 2 days in per week would be, at a minimum is what I would say. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I think three days would be better than the more the better.
Not the more the
Not,
better, but
but within reason,
yeah,
right?
within reason.
Yeah.
So just really trying to get some exercise in. And look, it doesn't have to be you go in there and you're doing deadlifts and you're doing squats and snatches. You don't have to do that. If you go in there and you just go through some movements until you get used to it, that's fine. You don't, everyone starts in some position. And if you haven't been doing it for a long time, or maybe you never did it at all, you should still go in there and just try to do something and ask someone for help. No one is going to look at you like you're a failure because you asked for help. If anything, they'll see some strength in that.
And not only that, I'd like to, like my mom, who's in her, she's going to be 70 soon. She was asking me, like, how much weight should I lift? And it's not really about how much weight you lift, it's about the intensity that you go in with.
Yeah.
And so don't worry about the weight. Although, if you're a young female, I would say don't shy away from the heavier weights.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, definitely lift heavy. And it's funny you say it because like my father being 75 is like really into his health now. It took him long enough. But
Everybody,
he's like
once you
pushing
hit a
hard.
certain age, I think it becomes more increasingly important.
Yeah. Well, I was on a call with him and he's like, "Yeah, I gotta do my farmer carries." And I'm like, What do you mean?" And we got this we got this pretty long driveway and he grabs like 30-pound dumbbells, 40-pound dumbbells in each hand and he walks for 15 minutes up and down the driveway, just doing farmer carries. God bless. Going on to the next one, number 6, is try to create more active leisure time. So try to find some things that are fun, that are moving. Taking dancer classes, like if you want to learn how to salsa, that would be great. Gardening, you're outside, you're digging, you're rolling around in dirt. Gardening is always a good thing. And even playing like a pickup sport. Like I know a lot of guys, they play like men's softball. I know some females that do women's soccer leagues. So finding something that, you could just engage in and stay active. A lot of other things too, especially out here in Utah, we have a lot of hiking. There's so many different trails and like just getting out. I mean, it's really, really hot right now, but getting out there and just moving and walking through nature. It's a beautiful thing. So you really just want to reduce the amount of time that you spend, watching TV, sitting down, using your phone and swiping. And trust me, I'm guilty of it. And I know Dr. Aaron's guilty of it as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the last one, and this is probably one of my favorite things to try to get people to do, is promoting active family time. So whether you have stuff where you go for a walk in the park, maybe you take the dog for a walk as a family at nighttime, playing games outside with each other. If it's summertime, having water balloon fights, whatever it is, just trying to get outside and doing those physical activities together. One of our clients was having trouble getting his activity in he owns a business. So he's very busy and he was trying to get his activity in. And what he wound up doing was you would say to he has 2 young kids and he would go on a bike ride with them. And that helped him get his movement in for the day. And he really enjoyed it. And the kids really enjoyed it too. And I thought that was an awesome way to be able to get some movement in
I
his
think
life.
the cycling thing is a good idea. If your kids are little too, you can get one of those wagons and strap it to the back of your bike. Make sure they wear a helmet. Make sure you wear a helmet. But good way to kind of take them for a little ride. I know even like, with infants, people run around with strollers. That's fun for the kids, and then it's good, activity and a good example too for the child by the parents.
So what you got from this podcast are the 5 biggest culprits leading to this type of lifestyle. The 5 main health risks associated with this lifestyle, and then 7 ways that you can avoid this type of lifestyle. So I hope you guys learned something today. Dr. Aaron, thanks for diving into the research for us. And we will see you all next week. So on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.